Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 268. Joining us today, our very own Washington correspondent, Bill B. in D.C. gives us another update. And then I reach out to Reason Magazine's Matt Welch for a thorough, long-awaited conversation here on the podcast. I am Pete Dominic. Time to stand up with me right now. Well, hello, my friends, and thank you very much for joining me today. I have an awesome show for you. I check in with Bill B. in D.C., have another wonderful, fascinating conversation with him about all the things happening in Washington, and I finally caught up with Matt Welch, because actually, longtime listener Joe Liotta said to me the other day, he's like, I can't believe Matt Welch is saying this crazy stuff, and I went and looked it up. I was like, that's not Matt Welch. That's Matt Walsh. But you know what? I should have Matt Welch on, and I got Matt Welch on. Thank you to Joe for mistaking him, and now he's on the show. So I had a great conversation with him as well. Yesterday, here on the podcast, I said I was going to name this first segment, the news segment, The Last 24. I floated that as a branding idea, as a name idea for this first segment, and Kelly Batko said, The Last 24 gets my vote, and Tina Winsett also loved it, and that's all I need. Two people saying they like a thing does it, or two people saying they don't like a thing, and several of you wanted me to get rid of Donald Trump's voice at the news dump. So you're all producers, y'all influence me, and if you're a paying subscriber, that much more. And I hope to see you guys on Thursday night at 8 for our regular hangout. But here is The Last 24. That's what I call it. This is when I go through some news and headlines and play a whole bunch of audio clips to give you context on what occurred in the world in the last 24 hours. Try to have some fun with it as well. But this, my friends, is the best news segment on any daily podcast, at least any daily podcast that's hosted, produced, edited, booked, and promoted by one person. Yeah, come on. The Daily New York Times, it's like 20 minutes long, and it's got like 47 people working on it. So I'm giving them a run. Anyway, let's get to The Last 24 right now on Stand Up. And I think we should start in Washington, D.C., of course, which is the center of the world's attention right now, where finally we heard from a public-facing agency, the FBI and DOJ, yesterday, held a joint press conference. I think I have that right. So here's a little audio from FBI's Stephen D'Antonio saying the agency is working really hard to arrest and charge multiple individuals who took part in the destruction.
The FBI is quite familiar with large-scale, complex, and fast-moving investigations. We are up to the challenge. As Director Wray says, the FBI does not do easy. To be clear, the brutality the American people watched with shock and disbelief on the 6th will not be tolerated by the FBI. The men and women of the FBI will leave no stone unturned in this investigation. Since these events, the FBI has worked hand in hand with the United States Attorney's Office and our law enforcement partners here in D.C. and across the country to arrest and charge multiple individuals who took part in the destruction. In 6 days, we have opened over 160 case files, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. The significance of this investigation is not lost on us. This is a 24/7, full-bore, extensive operation into what happened that day. We cannot do our job without the help of the American people. Since our call for tips, videos, and pictures, we have received more than 100,000 pieces of digital media, which is absolutely fantastic. And we are scouring every one for investigative and intelligence leads.
Well, I don't know about you, but I'm happy that it seems like the FBI is doing what they're supposed to do, their job. But the Washington Post reports under the headline, FBI report warned of war at Capitol, contradicting claims that there was no indication of a looming violence. Yeah, of course they knew. Why didn't they do anything about it? It just seems there's going to be so many questions, and I think congressional investigations into what happened and who knew what when and why weren't they prepared, as there should be. And it sucks because it's such a distraction from trying to get other things done. Hopefully they can do it all at once. And really, I think that Democrats should do what Republicans did and what Trump did and flood the zone with information and developments and just move everything through and do it all. Do everything that needs to get done. They can do it. But the Washington Post reports a day before rioters stormed Congress, an FBI office in Virginia issued an explicit warning that extremists were preparing to travel to Washington to commit violence and war, according to an internal document reviewed by the Washington Post that contradicts senior officials' declaration that the Bureau had no intelligence indicating anyone at last week's demonstrations in support of President Trump planned to do harm. I think we should probably prepare to see a lot more of this kind of thing. What did they know and why didn't they act? Which is always a huge problem when these kinds of terrorist attacks occur. And more importantly, what is going to happen in the next week that is going to potentially be even worse with more loss of life? Are people really going to come to Washington, D.C. with guns? I talk about that with Bill B. coming up. But I can tell you this, Capitol Police briefed House Democrats about 3 more planned demonstrations in the coming days, and the president himself declared a state of emergency in Washington, D.C., citing the, quote, emergency conditions surrounding Joe Biden's inauguration. And a lot of smart people I trust and follow in social media are saying that there should not be a public inauguration for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. Where do you fall down on that? Speaking of the president, what was his plan? Really, what was his plan? My friend Dr. Jason Johnson took a shot at it on MSNBC yesterday. Let's take a listen.
Highlights how ridiculous Trump's plan was from the beginning, right? This idea that he actually thought that this armed insurrection was going to stop the count, which is sort of the political violence equivalent of if I pull this fire alarm, then my teacher won't grade my paper. You know, at some point, she's going to come back and grade your paper. Like it was a ridiculous idea from the very beginning. But I think what was even more telling is this reminded me, Nicole, of what I've never believed all along during this administration, which is the idea that there were adults in the room, that there were people in this administration that could hold Donald Trump in check. Every single person they thought they could call to bring this together couldn't do it. They probably would have been more effective calling Sean Hannity or Steve Bannon or Alex Jones, because those are the only people that Donald Trump believes. It's also a reminder of the fact that anything that we can do to get him and everybody around him out of office as soon as possible is absolutely necessary, because there are no guardrails and there are no adults in the room.
Well, is he going to resign? Is he going to be impeached? Are they going to use the 25th Amendment? It looks like Mike Pence is really not considering that, which is crazy, of course, because his boss tried to have him killed. I love what Ali Velshi tweeted about this today. He said, I have to give it to Mike Pence. If my boss stood around while a crowd they encouraged plotted to hang me and actually set up the gallows, I'd totally invoke the 25th on my boss. Pence is just a bigger man than I am, I suppose. Hashtag the other cheek. I mean, apparently Trump and Mike Pence sat down and had a conversation today for the first time since the insurrection on the Capitol by the Cosplatriots. Who came up with that? Who told me about that? I love that one. Cosplatriots. And what the hell did those two talk about? Trump looked the other way while they were going to hang Mike Pence. And he said all kinds of horrible things about Mike Pence as well to put him in that jam or potentially noose. What was that conversation like? Boy, I'd like to be a fly on Mike Pence's head for that one. And speaking of the Cosplatriots, I think The Daily Show, Comedy Central's The Daily Show's correspondent Jordan Klepper, who I love, did some of the best reporting, also really funny, if it weren't so sad, reporting from the violent mob attack last week. Here's just a couple clips that I chose from his longer 6-minute piece, which is so good. Here's the best ones, I think, for audio. Here's Jordan Klepper at the Capitol while it was being invaded, and just before and while it was being invaded last week.
Excuse me, is the sedition happening over here? Is the sedition, is it over here? Do you know where the sedition is?
We do not consent to be governed.
Nor shall we ever be consented to be governed by an illegal, fraudulent election.
But you elected a guy who also doesn't care much about consent.
We do not consent.
Will you accept Joe Biden as President of the United States on the 20th?
No, I will not accept the narrative. No, I will not. So look, I've educated myself about this, okay? I don't know all what's in the Constitution.
Have you read it? It's pretty short.
The Constitution of America?
Yeah.
I've not read the whole thing, no. You've read the entire thing?
Yes, it's remarkably short.
All right. I doubt that, but it's okay.
You should read it, because you might be committing a seditious act in an hour and a half.
Okay, I'm not going to comment about that.
I mean, all of that was pretty much before it was unraveling, and at least that one guy can't say he wasn't warned by Comedy Central's Jordan Klepper. Here's more.
The people didn't vote for Joe Biden, though. The Dominion system voted for Joe Biden.
Do you think it's possible that Hugo Chavez infiltrated the Dominion systems, changed the votes, orchestrated by Joe Biden?
I think anything's possible.
Do you think it's possible that a president who never polled above 50% lost the election and is sore about it?
Absolutely not.
No.
That's not possible.
No.
The one thing you couldn't help but notice was just how many people looked like they were preparing for battle. From the tactical vests to the pitchforks, this rally felt charged.
You can tell these people really love America by the number of weapons they brought to hurt other Americans. Looks like we got some Proud Boy action. Either that or the Cabela's street team. What's your flag say?
Come and take it.
Come and take it. Do you have a weapon?
No.
No? Why not? Did they take it? Sorry, bro. I was worried that we were in trouble, but then I saw that we got the tyranny response team here, and I feel a lot better.
There's a guy wearing tyranny response t-shirt.
And for those supposedly caught off guard, claiming they didn't see this violence coming, if you paid attention to any of these rallies, all you have to do is open your eyes and ears. The message isn't exactly subtle.
Make no mistake, we have the guns, and we are now in the streets. We are going to clean this place out one way or another. You look down there. I have 1 million plus people angry. Very, very angry people.
Can I ask why you're carrying a pitchfork?
Well, a pitchfork is it's just an iconic representation of what people over time have done in this country.
It feels more like a weapon, to be quite honest.
No, it's not. It's farm equipment, and it's legal in this city.
Yeah, are you farming today?
It's a representation. We're not asking for violence right now.
I got to tell you, from the movies I've seen, the hordes of people with pitchforks are usually the bad guys.
How close do you think we are to 1861?
But hang on.
Are we close?
Hell yeah, you are.
That's the Civil War.
Would you rather die on your knees than be free?
Aren't you a little bit freaked out about 600,000 Americans die? I see you're not wearing masks. Never mind.
That was so good. Oh my gosh, it's so scary and it's so sad in a way, but it's also hilarious when smart, funny, witty people with security guards go out and do what Jordan Klepper was doing there. I've done that kind of thing myself before, and yeah, it's terrifying, and I'm sure that you heard that and were as scared and upset and as affected as I was, but still, so good. At least I think so. All right, so let's go to why these people feel this way. It's because of people like Brian Kilmeade on Fox News, who, by the way, I know Brian Kilmeade a little bit, always the nicest guy in the world. And I think his reputation, is that he's a very nice guy in person. But man, is he a terrible political analyst and commentator on the TV. And yet he just keeps on talking. Here he is on Fox News, saying what a lot of idiots have been saying, that impeachment would be too divisive right now. What a shithead.
Believe that America could be more effective and has been ineffective because we've been at each other's throats. What could be more disenchanting?
They don't want him to run again. They don't want him to run again.
They don't want him to run again. That's fine. But you don't understand, too, there's a lot of people that want him to, number one, continue to be a force in the Republican Party, believe a lot what he believes. He has 75 million supporters. So if you have an overarching sense that I got to bring the country together because we see what's happening around this country, how 50 state houses are being threatened on Inauguration Day, this is the last thing you want to do. It astounds me that now Chuck Schumer, guys, is exploring a possible workaround using the authority granted to two senators back in 2004 to reconvene the Senate in times of emergency, I assume this, and have a quick impeachment vote. Fantastic idea. Mitch McConnell has to sign off on it, but it would be as dumb as Nancy Pelosi hopping on 60 Minutes last night and saying the president's an imminent threat and he has to be derailed.
I do have one quick point, which a lot of people are making. Since it's officially a bipartisan impeachment effort now, what's divisive about a bipartisan push for impeachment? Tim Wise tweets that Brian Kilmeade's official position is give in to terrorists who are threatening violence. Good to know. I also loved Wajahat Ali responding to this kind of argument where we have to think about their feelings and we have to be concerned about becoming more divisive. He tweeted, Guys, Osama is just really frustrated with the political situation. He has tremendous economic anxiety. We must understand and comfort Osama's rage. Reach out. Also, if we call him a terrorist or crack down on his violence, he'll only become more angry. Let's move on for unity. And now here's why I like to do the podcast, the intro, the news section, the last 24, late at night, the night before, so that when you wake up, you get the freshest, most breaking news reports. And this scoop goes to Axios, who reported late Tuesday night, there's a better than 50-50 chance that Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell would vote to convict President Trump in an impeachment trial, sources tell Axios. The Senate institutional loyalists are fomenting a counter-revolution to Trump, said a top Republican close to McConnell. Wow. Axios, why it matters? This would represent one of the most shocking and damning votes in the history of American politics by the most powerful Republican in Congress. And McConnell's vote would open the door to the possibility that Trump could be convicted and prohibited from running for president again. And there would also be other consequences. He would lose access to top secret intelligence as a former president, as well as, I think, Secret Service protection, too. He's going to have to hire his own protection force of fat old. He's going to have plenty of them. Let's be honest. He's going to have all kinds of people who would love to stand around him and listen to his bullshit until they get to know him and realize he doesn't want to have anything to do with them, and then they stop protecting him. All right, let me take you back to Fox News again, where last night Brett Hume, who is a senior political analyst apparently at Fox News, was on with Tucker Carlson, and I think he told the truth. He had some pretty good, I think this is good, accurate, fairly accurate political analysis from the senior statesman at Fox News and horse-faced asshole Brett Hume.
Trump is obviously at this point radioactive, not just among liberals and Democrats, where he's always been absolutely loathed, but now to a great extent among everyday Republicans. I don't think there's any doubt he retains his hardest of hardcore base. They will be with him forever, I'm sure. But the rest of the Republican Party, they're looking at this and they're saying, what we don't want is this guy hanging around in 2 or 4 years, in 2 years during the congressional elections, and worst of all, running for president again after that. Because, he'll pull off a segment of the Republican vote, make it unavailable to ordinary Republicans, regular Republicans, and be a curse on them. So, that's a hard sort of a political calculation they're making. And the other thing is they're furious with him. They believe in their bones that he cost them the 2 special elections in the state of Georgia, which they manifestly should not have lost. Both those candidates were ahead and didn't quite get enough to avoid a runoff, and then they lost in the runoff. A lot of Republicans stayed home, offended by Trump. That's the reasoning anyway. So that's the reason the Republicans are turning away from him. They think he's bad news politically.
Brett Hume on Tucker Carlson. You heard Tucker Carlson squeaking there at the end? Let me see if I can isolate that for you and bring it back. All right, here it is.
They think.
All right, let's listen to that one more time.
They think.
Tucker Carlson, king of all douche. All right. In other political headlines reacting to the siege on the Capitol, authorities released image of a man they have wanted for killing the Capitol police officer. Calls are growing for an Olympic gold medalist swimmer who was part of the attack on the Capitol be stripped of his medals after teammates ID'd him among the MAGA insurgency. A Trump supporter has been found dead in Georgia after being charged in the Capitol riot. Republican congressman attacked the Capitol Police for requiring metal detectors to enter the building after the insurrection. That was a big story last night. A QAnon congresswoman is facing calls for her arrest after live tweeting Nancy Pelosi's location to rioters. And Liz Cheney has become the highest ranking Republican to announce she'll vote to impeach Trump. You got to see or hear her statement. Let me just read it to you. It's real quick. If you haven't heard it, I remember I was listening to, I don't know who yesterday on the news read it, and it was very powerful. Wyoming Congressman and House Republican Conference Chair Liz Cheney, I think she's the 3rd highest ranking Republican in the Republican House. She writes, on January 6, 2021, a violent mob attacked the United States Capitol to obstruct the process of our democracy and stop the counting of presidential electoral votes. This insurrection caused injury, death, and destruction in the most sacred place in our republic. Much more will become clear in coming days and weeks, but what we know now is enough. The President of the United States summoned this mob, assembled the mob, and lit the flame of this attack. Everything that followed was his doing. None of this would have happened without the president. The president could have immediately and forcefully intervened to stop the violence. He did not. There has never been a greater betrayal by a president of the United States of his office and his oath to the Constitution. I will vote to impeach the president. Wow, what a statement from Liz Cheney. I wonder who wrote that statement. I wonder if her father Dick wrote that statement. I wonder if she wrote it and then she sent it to me. I'm Dick Cheney. Sorry. Why the hell did we just hear from Dick Cheney? Where did he come from? I don't know why he was in there. And I saw this tweet I wanted to read. Now it's time for random tweets in the last 24. Jeff Charlotte tweets, there are the 5 who died in the siege and the 2 who committed suicide after. That's 7 plus the 3,692 COVID dead of today, plus at least 280,000 of the 380,000 that preceded them. No U.S. president has ever killed so many Americans for nothing, not even an awful ideology. Well said, Jeff Charlotte. Here's another tweet from the last 24 from Jared Yates Sexton writes, the right has no principles beyond pursuit of power and wealth. They're not pro-life. They're not for free markets. They're not fiscally or socially conservative. They're not pro-troops. And after their people murdered cops, we know they're not actually pro-law enforcement. I like that one from Jared. Sam Stein tweeted, I know this sounds silly, but did we underestimate how powerful Trump's Twitter feed was in the context of intra-party GOP politics? Yeah, that's interesting. It does seem to be something worth discussing potentially. They can get more done without him tweeting threats at them constantly. And I tweeted, I do a daily podcast, and it's still hard to be relevant because what we are witnessing are major new developments almost every hour. Hard to tear yourself away from Twitter and cable news. And 2 more headlines breaking late on Tuesday night. Number 1, a huge development. YouTube is suspending President Donald Trump's channel for at least 1 week and potentially longer after his channel earned a strike under the platform's policies, the company said Tuesday evening. A recent video on Trump's channel had incited violence, YouTube told CNN Business. That video has now been removed. And the other big headline developing late, just before midnight, the House approved a resolution calling to remove Donald Trump despite Mike Pence rejecting the 25th Amendment push. The House voted Tuesday night to approve a resolution calling for President Donald Trump to be removed from office through the 25th Amendment in the wake of the violent siege of the U.S. Capitol last week. It's a symbolic rebuke after Vice President Mike Pence made clear earlier Tuesday evening, he's got no plans to invoke the 25th Amendment to remove the president in a letter released just hours ahead of the House vote. So while symbolic, it still matters. All right, now it's time for the news dump, everybody. This is where I do headlines that aren't COVID or directly politically related, but are important and probably undercovered because of all the politics and COVID. News dump. That is my current news dump opening sound effect. Sorry, we have to work on that. Oh, well, look at this. The Mega Millions is up to $625 million, the largest lottery prize in nearly 2 years. The big prize for Powerball, the other national lottery game, isn't far behind at $550 million for Wednesday night's drawing. Man, I should probably get in on this. Are you going to get in on this? You gonna make fun of me if I buy a couple lotto tickets? I usually wait until the pot is so big that it makes headlines like this, and that's when I usually buy a couple lotto tickets, and then I put them in the fire, because that's really what you should probably be doing with your cash in the first place. Because the lotto is really just a trap for poor people. All right, moving on. The U.S. government's plans to carry out its first execution of a female inmate in nearly 7 decades are on hold. Oh, how nice. 2 other executions set for later this week have also been halted because the inmates tested positive for COVID-19. Wait, are you telling me that they were on death row and now they are not going to get executed because they got COVID-19? That seems like the best development I've heard as a result of this entire pandemic. The 3 executions were to be the last before President-elect Joe Biden, an opponent of the federal death penalty, is sworn in next week. Now it's unclear how many more people Trump can kill before January 20th, which is also another reason to impeach him. right away. Get rid of him right now. Michigan, I guess this is technically a political story, but still undercover. The Associated Press has learned that former Michigan Governor Rick Snyder, his health director, and other ex-officials have been told they're being charged after a new investigation of the Flint water scandal. Man, that's so important. I'm definitely going to follow up and read about that. Maybe even have Nancy Kaffler from Detroit Free Press on. All right, the company Crocs, I've been talking for a long time about how much I love Crocs shoes. I have a lot of Crocs. I'm wearing them now. Apparently, they had their best quarterly profits ever. And so they say it's a bittersweet moment because it's been such a horrible year for so many companies and so many people. But amidst a global pandemic in 2020, Crocs is delivering their strongest revenue in their history. I'm telling you, they make good stuff. Don't tell me bad things about that company because I'd rather be in ignorance. I've had a bunch of pair of Crocs for years and years. Well, here's a nice story. Ratatouille, the TikTok musical, has raised $1 million for the Actors Fund for actors who are out of work as a result of the pandemic. That's a good story. Here's another good story. Arctic oil drilling plants are suffering a stunning setback as almost no one shows up for the sale. Yet nobody wants to actually lease the drilling leases in the Alaskan Arctic. No major oil companies. How about that? We talked about that a few weeks ago. And that is your news dump for the day of Wednesday, and it's the 13th of January. Okay. My first guest, coming up, Matt Welch. Had a great long conversation with Matt Welch of Reason Magazine and one of the co-hosts of a great podcast, the Fifth Column podcast. But right now, I wanted to check in again with our friend, and I don't think he likes it, but I'm calling him anyway, the stand-up Washington correspondent, Bill Boyle down in Washington, D.C. Had another great conversation with him, catching up on what has happened, what he thinks is going to happen, the political analysis, and I just got so many tweets and comments and messages from people about how much they love Bill. John Carroll late last night said something about how much he loves listening to Bill, and I always love talking to him. And so here is just another conversation with our friend Bill B in D.C. on Twitter at Bill B in D.C.
Peter, how are you?
There he is. Bill Boyle, everybody. A lot of kind words coming in about your appearances this week.
That's very nice of them.
So I figured
low standards. I love it.
I figured this is a very important time to be talking to you, someone who both lives in Washington, D.C. and understands how politics and media works. And so I have several questions to get an update from you tonight, which is I feel like we're inside on episode 24 with Kiefer Sutherland because every hour there's new developments.
Sure.
And so I don't know where we're at, but I want to start by asking you about the politics. We've seen now or heard that there's a conversation, an argument between the House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy and the president. We've now seen Liz Cheney's statement and Mitch McConnell. There is reporting on Mitch McConnell seemingly open to impeachment. Bill, how do you see everything I just said in terms of the dynamics with the Republican caucus in Congress?
I think what's happening, the big thing that's happening is that Trump is showing virtually zero remorse, none. And he is also signaling very strongly that he is going to be the bull in the Republican China shop, basically for as long as he's allowed to be. And he's going to be the bull, frankly, in our democracy as long as he's allowed to be. And, I'm not surprised Lynn Cheney's doing this. She is an avatar of the sort of establishment Republican Party. But the way she did it is really interesting because she does not mince a single word. It is 100%. Let me actually quote it to you.
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead.
There has never been a greater betrayal by a president of the United States of his office and his oath to the Constitution. I mean, that's like you're talking about Aaron Burr or Benedict Arnold. There's no mincing in there at all. And by the way, you know what? I'm going to say words that I have never said before in my life, but good fucking job, Lynn Cheney. Really good. Because by doing that, she didn't just say, okay, the establishment part of the party is going to vote for Trump to go out. she made the argument in the baldest, clearest, most unnuanced terms you could. And that's a powerful thing. It's a good thing she did. And I never say that about Lynn Cheney. But this is really a good thing she did. And what she's doing, she's giving tons of cover to other people. Number one, if you are a Republican like Representative Katko in New York.
Yeah, that's my hometown. That's my parents' congressman, John Katko. He also put out a statement, Katko's statement on this.
Yeah, his is to allow the President of the United States to incite this attack without consequence is a direct threat to the future of our democracy. In other words, if you let somebody launch a coup, however slapstick and stupid, and they get away with it without punishment, the next person is going to launch a more capable coup, figuring they're not going to get punished either. So this is really, I expected sort of watered down, kind of like, yes, we're doing this, but the Democrats can do whatever they want to do. This is jumping in with both feet. I suspect they're going to pull 15 to maybe 20 more House members with them. If the dam really breaks, who knows what that number could be. But the big thing is that now there is discussion that there are something like 20 senators who might be open to conviction, according to Jonathan Martin anyway. Mitch McConnell has kicked that door open himself by saying flat out that Trump committed impeachable offenses. And by the way, that none of this is accidental. McConnell, when he launches a coup, it's not slapstick, and it's intended to kill the king. And that's what he's doing right now. He is floating it. He's getting everybody ready for the Republicans to maybe vote for impeachment. And he's giving people permission. And that is a really big deal. I mean, it's a possibility Trump gets convicted after he's impeached now. And I would have absolutely not said that was possible this morning.
Yeah, so convicted impeached in the House and convicted in the Senate is what you mean.
Correct.
Correct. And why do you think did that dynamic change mainly because of Georgia election last week? Would Mitch McConnell have done this regardless based on the insurrection at the Capitol by the Cos Patriots?
I think you probably needed both. And I think you also probably needed Trump's very evident lack of contrition for any of it. That's I think the key thing. Trump is going to keep on going, and he's going to keep on going, and he's going to keep on going. And the only thing that's going to stop Trump is when Trump destroys himself or somebody else destroys him. And he's well on the way to destroying himself right now. He's giving them no option, right? If you're the Republican Party and you want to exist and win elections a year from now in the midterms in 2022, you cannot have this guy taking a crap on your shoes every time you go anywhere. And that's what he plans to do.
So what I see potentially happening is that folks that are voting in Congress, the sources that they have, it's not like something happened overseas. It happened to them. They witnessed it with their own eyes. And so, Bill, are you hearing things? Are they hearing things where they're saying in a week or two, we are going to hear, here's what we've seen so far about all these people, all these different videos. Are we going to hear a whole bunch more? Are there things that people are hearing that are going to be so bad and ugly about who was there and how they got there and what they did that they know how much worse it's about to get, the optics of it and how it might affect public opinion? Because it seems like things have gotten worse and worse for both the people who were there and part of the insurrection and all of those who supported it and helped organize it.
Right. Well, so that Ali guy who helped set up this whole march on the Capitol, I forget his last name, but he is putting out these loony videos from hiding, I guess, where he is naming Congress people that he claims helped him, including Gosar. And, I would normally go, okay, this is just some crazy Trump lunatic. But here's the thing that I found to be really interesting. Today, the U.S. attorney in D.C., when he gave his brief little conference, he said that something to the effect of that they had put together a crack team, and this is the direct quote, of national security and public corruption prosecutors to track down and, any conspiracy or to convict people of sedition. The public corruption part really struck me. Now, maybe I don't know too much about the law, but that seems like a weird thing to throw in there. It's not public corruption if Joe Blow from Troy, New York goes into the Congress. If a congressman was setting up that happening, maybe that's where the public corruption comes in. So I think that, and also the U.S. Attorney in D.C. really laid out there, there's going to be some things that are going to blow your mind. I suspect coordination is going to be what we're talking about. I suspect that, I think the last time I spoke to you, I talked about Jim Acosta reporting that people in the White House were clearly speaking to people who were rioting in the building or in Congress. So, if there's blockbuster stuff to come out, that strikes me as what it would be. And by the way, I suspect that no one totally knows, right? But they can see the outlines of it. They can see where it could go. And, Mitch McConnell's not a guy who got as far as he did by waiting until things landed on his head, right?
Right.
He's a player. He's smart. He thinks ahead, and he figures, what if we don't impeach this guy? And then it turns out that there was an actual conspiracy of however shambolic it was to try to overcome our democratic system. Is he going to want to be the guy who didn't impeach at that point? No, he's not. So I think they suspect you're right. I think they expect it's going to get a lot worse. I also think that they really want to kill off Trump as a political force. And they've got every good reason in the world to do it.
Yeah, I want to ask you about that last, but before I get to killing off Trump as a political force, as we have gotten almost a week away from the insurrection on the Capitol, Wednesday the 6th, Bill, you being there in D.C., what else have you heard? What else have you thought about or learned that has in any other way affected your opinion about what you saw last week? It's been almost a week. What else? What have you learned, and what have you heard in the conversations with your friends there in D.C. and reading news and so on? And then also, what are you hearing about what might still happen?
Right. So, I mean, the big thing that's happened, which I think has happened to most people, is every day I hear something that makes me realize it was worse than I thought it was, and that it was more dangerous than I thought it was. And
yeah, like what?
I mean, like that one officer lured everybody up the stairs, and to his left you could have just walked through those doors onto the Senate floor. That just is amazing. I mean, what I've learned in the last 6 days is that what happened on the 6th of January, if it had gone in a worse direction, would have either been a hostage situation or it would have been a massacre. Okay, because the guys who were in close control of the Congress people, those guys are carrying MP5s. They have submachine guns, and they would have fought at that point. I mean, the one thing the Capitol Police did do is protected their VIPs quite well. But had things gone a little farther, they would have had to use force to do it. And I'm telling you, they would not have been careful at that point. It would have been all bets are off and everyone's shooting. So that, I would say those are the things that I've learned. Where things are going, I don't think people realize that the DC police beat the living snot out of the Proud Boys in DC on that Wednesday night. And there's video you can find online of DC cops yelling night shift and charging into Proud Boys and knocking them on their asses. And I think that what has happened, if I had to bet, if you're the Proud Boys, you realize you're not going to come down here and intimidate the DC police anymore without getting thrown in jail and getting your nose broken. I think that the idea of a riot, unfortunately, and I'm saying this may sound weird, but unfortunately, everyone knows that's not going to work now if you're these crazy right wingers. The only thing that's going to work from their perspective, and it's insane, but I think they're going to bring guns. I think that's what's going to happen Sunday or Monday or Tuesday or Wednesday of next week, or maybe all of them. And I do think DC is vastly better prepared for it now than it was then, last week. But I do think violence is almost certain. And it's going to be a rough 8 days here. It's going to be a really rough 8 days.
I don't think so. I don't think it's certain. I think you know a lot more. I think your opinion is more informed, and I think that you're not someone who is too hyperbolic about such things. Certainly not in your hometown. But I feel like America has seen what the consequences are for these people who invaded the Capitol last week. And they're seeing that a lot of them are embarrassed in front of their families and their communities. Some of them are being suspended from their jobs. And I still feel like most people, there's a lot of people who did not even realize that they were committing a crime, I think.
Right.
And I don't think that that's going to be the case in the next few days. I don't think people want to go to jail or die. However, if you're paying attention to the conversations that they're having online, and like the one I overheard at the deli the other day, I talked about it on yesterday's podcast, maybe I'm wrong. I mean, maybe they really do want to die or go to jail.
So when you said, I don't think people in America feel that way or see this and think X, you don't live in the same country they live in.
I'm paying attention to the stuff they're paying attention to. I know them. Yeah, it's where I grew up.
You're not on an arc of becoming more extremist.
Right.
And that's the arc they're on. They're being active. It's funny when people say to me, when you hear congressmen going like, let's not do impeachment because that's going to inflame people. That is so ridiculous.
Yeah.
The fire is already burning really badly now. And I think we're at that sort of initial peak period where, and again, by the way, if nobody shows up Sunday through Wednesday and does anything violent, I will be incredibly happy. That would be an amazing outcome. But I just can tell you, I mean, I'm hearing things, I asked a friend of mine who gets, who gets briefed and said, what's the outlook look for Sunday to Wednesday? And his quote was remarkably bad. I talked to other folks and, I hear that they're being told have a full tank of gas and 7 to 10 days of supplies. These are people, in agencies getting briefings and having their security people tell them what they need to do. Stay out of downtown from Saturday to Thursday, real hunkering down mentality. Now, granted, all of these organizations, particularly now, are motivated to over worry than under worry, because obviously that's what happened last week. But it's the craziest things I've heard here, certainly, since 9/11. I mean, easily since 9/11, right. This is the most insanely wound up everybody is. And, you're in that weird thing, too, where the White House, you're not sure of. Uniformed Secret Service, you're not sure where their loyalties lie.
Are you?
Right?
Do you think that? You're not sure? You're questioning the loyalties of the Secret Service? I mean, and it's one of them just got removed for being so loyal to the president and supportive of the actual insurrectionists, is my understanding. I mean, there's reporting on that. So and obviously people there's plenty of Secret Service people that obviously lean right. And you got people like Don Bongino, who's one of the biggest stars in the entire Republican media atmosphere, former Secret Service agent. And so, but I'm surprised to hear you be suspicious of the Secret Service.
The Uniformed Secret Service, yeah. I mean, I saw these guys I saw the Park Police and the Secret Service beating the living crap out of BLM in the summer and Antifa in the summer. And then I saw how gentle they've been with the Proud Boys this winter. And that makes me wonder. I mean, and by the way, when I say I'm not sure of them, let's put it this way. I'm only 90% sure of them. But that's the first time in 30 some odd years that I've ever even wondered. And when you start to have to wonder about these guys, that's pretty amazing. I mean, Uniformed Secret Service didn't load up 50 guys from the White House and race over to Congress to help out. They sent over nobody. Right? So
why?
You got to. They probably weren't allowed to, even if they wanted to. But even then, how much did they really want to? I mean, it's clear that Trumpism has seeped into some of these structures, these security structures. Obviously, it seeped into the Capitol Police to a degree, and not that they, I don't know if there was complicity or collusion with anybody, but clearly they just couldn't even imagine that the Trump people were a security threat to anybody, which is unbelievably amazing given how publicly they were talking. The FBI was screaming about it for the week before, what I understand.
It's a hard thing to convince people, especially really reactionary people who aren't that patient or well read into politics or how things actually work, and they think it's all a movie. You know what I mean? These type of people, but it's hard to convince them that the Capitol Police leadership wasn't somehow in on the planning or complicit versus being completely inept, surprised, and just poorly equipped and planned. That's hard for people to believe that because usually law enforcement has some kind of intelligence gathering mechanisms that tell them what the threats are, and the rest of us don't necessarily see that. In this case, the opposite is true. We all heard these things. All you got to do is go to certain websites, listen to Sarah Kendzior or so many other reporters,
right,
and we all knew it. So it's hard to believe that the Capitol Police weren't paying the same attention to it. But I do think there's a case for it. I think there's a case for them being the Keystone Cops on this,
right? Well,
rather than being, part and parcel of the whole planning of it and just looking the other way.
Here's the thing: conspiracies usually don't work. And conspiracies are really hard to keep secret, and conspiracies are really hard to make, are hard to even put together. I mean, it's in a funny way. It's why I really wonder. Like, I personally think that Trump knew what he was doing when he sent that crowd to Congress. I think he was trying to pressure Congress to throw some Trump pixie dust on it, and poof, Don is president again. I really think that he is that deluded, but also purposeful in that he sent them over there to pressure Congress.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think he ever imagined they'd get in to Congress, but I would be willing to bet that there was plenty of discussion about, no, don't let them beef up. No National Guard.
Right.
It's sort of, there's a thing called the Führer principle in Nazi Germany, which I think applies here, which is that people down in the lower ranks, to try to curry favor with that one node of real power at the top, try to act in ways that they assume that leader would want.
Right.
And so I think that there is some of that at minimum at work where, there were people were saying, well, is the president going to get upset if I really throw 4 big fences around Congress and then they can't close to the building and then congressmen can't hear them yell and then that doesn't create the pressure he wants? No. Let's not approve big fences.
Well,
I think that sort of thing is what probably happened.
I also think that there's one big part of this that deserves a lot more investigative reporting and I think a congressional investigation, which is what responsibilities did the president of the United States feel he had when the Capitol was clearly under attack? Because there are no other parallels outside of 9/11 in our lifetime. In 9/11, Bush was rushed into a place, onto a plane, Cheney and others in D.C. Everybody's rushed into, and they went immediately into, I would say that Cheney and everybody around him and the president in 9/11 were making split-second decisions. They were all on top of it, completely on top of it, trying to figure out what had happened right away. I don't even know if there are many criticisms outside of Cheney unconstitutionally, illegally taking power from the president. Other than that, I don't know that hour was that controversial. This president, during his hour, sat in front of a TV, is the reporting I've heard. And I feel like that alone is almost impeachable. You did nothing. You did nothing.
Yeah, see, it's actually, I think it's much worse than that.
Oh.
There was an article in the Washington Post. I think McCarthy had his fingerprints all over it. I think Ivanka Trump had her fingerprints all over it, where they were talking about how he was entranced by the TV and you couldn't talk to him. Bullshit. He wanted to pressure Congress, and this was a lot of pressure on Congress. The idea that he couldn't do anything just was too entranced. I'm sorry, that denies him agency that he has shown again and again and again. He created this whole situation of these furiously angry people who are in Washington, who get wound up enormously by him and then sent directly over to Congress. And I'm supposed to believe that he just sat there in a daze watching it happen? Bullshit. I think it's a classic Trump thing where he set up a situation not fully thinking through how it would all work out. And then as he crashed and burned in that situation, he thought he was winning. I think that's what happened. I mean, remember, people say he wasn't doing anything. That's actually wrong. We know for a fact that he would talk to Mike Lee on the phone. We know for a fact they had contact with other congressmen, that he personally was pressuring. So those two stories don't fit. Either he was calling people and he was active, or he was sitting gormlessly in front of his television entranced by it. Bullshit. He was trying to use the situation ineptly, slapstickly, but trying to launch a coup. They're trying to exert political power by the violence of his followers. That's it.
I don't know if J.L. Cowen has made the videos yet on what those phone calls were.
Oh, they would be pretty glorious, I think, actually.
Kevin, it's me. Listen, what are you doing right now? Open the door. There's a couple of fellas down the hallway from you. I mean, you just go down there and open the door for them.
Good MAGA people. Good MAGA people.
A couple beautiful people just want to have a word with Mike Pence, okay? A few minutes back, you said, and I said I'd come back to it. I wish I could get your exact phrasing right, but it was about kind of crushing the modern Republican Party, the Trump movement, I think. And I just want to throw one thing into this before you elaborate here, but I think a lot about, because, you know, you and I were talking about this every day back when I was on, from POTUS to the other channels at SiriusXM covering politics. I was there during Paul Ryan. I was there during John Boehner before him. John Boehner and Paul Ryan left Washington, D.C. They were each Speaker of the House. They both quit, not under pressure from their peers. They just saw what was happening. Paul Ryan, that was basically his dream job. He'd run for vice president before. That dude hightailed it out of there because they saw what was coming. This is what came. It was inevitable. John Boehner and Paul Ryan were extremists when it came to policy and staunch conservatives, right-wing conservatives. They look like serious, normal adults right now based on what the Republican Party has become due to Donald Trump and his acolytes. What do you think of what I just said there in terms of setting this up and where we're at right now and where we're going, most importantly?
Well, so, you know, I've always said that Trump, he gets too much credit for being this sui generis creation, right? But he didn't any more than Adolf Hitler did. Trump is not some like great man who molded the times to him like Napoleon did. Trump is a symptom of these times. He couldn't have existed 10 years ago or 20 years ago as a politician, or not a successful one. And in 10 years from now, he would be completely outmoded. He was the right malign figure for the moment that he was in. You know, as people are completely ensconced and immersed and influenced by social media, he was, you know, we found a social media candidate that would like sort of exhibit all of the revanchist, right-wing, reactionary feelings
but don't you
of
think
Americans.
Obama broke them? The election of Barack Obama created the Tea Party movement. The Tea Party movement created Trump.
I disagree with that.
Go ahead.
Obama was an extraordinarily centrist president who, you know, was in every way.
Not to them, he wasn't.
Well, but that's my point, is that any normal centrist president, either they would have been, you know, on a scale of 1 to 10, they would have been flipping out at an 11, or they would have been flipping out at a 14. Right? These are people who modernity and where the country's going and the ethnic makeup of the country is going are all going away from them. And so it's not really Obama. Obama, because he was African American, certainly that added a more spice to their fury and racism. But we were going here anyway eventually. It's just a question of how toxic it got, and it happened to get incredibly toxic. So to get sort of to where you wanted me to say where we're going.
Yeah.
I think we're heading towards a situation where any Republican who's got a brain in his head looks at the demographics, looks at what's happening in the suburbs all across the country, and says, it's sort of a good example is Trump is like Pearl Harbor, right? The Japanese admiral, or the Japanese, leader, who I guess is an admiral, who launched Pearl Harbor, when he was ordered to do it, he said, okay, I can run wild for a while, for a year or two. And after that, the Americans are going to crush us. That's what Trump, I think, is. I think that's what McConnell sees. Trump let them run wild for 3 or 4 years. But as time goes, they lost. Think about it. They lost the Senate, they lost the House, and now they're losing the presidency. In a period where the Electoral College balance totally favors them, and where the amount of, rural versus urban congressional people and gerrymandering totally favors them. They lost all, 2 of the major branches of the government. Trump is poison for them going forward. They're going to keep losing more and more people. They lost Georgia probably 8 or 10 years before they probably should have. And so I think that what McConnell sees and what Liz Cheney sees is you've got to kill this poison. You have to kill it, and you have to move. You got to get past it. If you don't, you end up the Whig Party. You're done, and you end up even worse. You end up like some sort of weird white nationalism Vortrekker party. So Cheney and McConnell, who are, however awful I think they often are, they're not dumb. They want a party that they feel like they can be president someday, or they can, have tons of power. And I think that they're looking forward and saying that Trump will destroy all of that. And I think he's done a pretty damn good job of destroying a lot of it already. So the future is a Republican civil war, to put it in blunt and short terms. Trump is going to force them, in effect, to crush him. They're going to try to crush him, and the jury's out on that. I think they'll probably succeed. And then, the Republican Party is going to be in a knife fight, trying to create some sort of normative mainstream identity for itself that still holds on to all these pissed off, rural and sort of lower half of the middle class folks in America who really wanted, they don't have religion anymore, and they don't have small town culture anymore. Trumpism and sort of Tea Partyism, that became their religion, that became their identity. And I think they've got a much harder time than Democrats do to go forward and have a viable party because of that.
Why do you say they don't have religion anymore?
Oh, I mean, I just was reading something the other day, but a lot of the people who call themselves evangelicals that are really hardcore Trump people don't go to church that much. A religious group, you and I like to spar about Catholicism. Bad or good, there are things in Catholicism that say, you can't go for this guy. And you really have to talk your way. It's a competing ideology. It's a competing lifestyle, a competing mentality. To believe in Trumpism, you have to literally believe things like the government says we won this election or you have to believe, for instance, that all Mexicans are rapists. However bad the Catholic Church is, that's not something that flies. And so people, and because of modern life and because of how church identity has changed, because of the child abuse scandals and everything else, I think people's attraction or bond to large religious groups or to large anything, people's trust in institutions in this country have gone way down. And now you have online the ability to tie into these other movements that are almost, look at QAnon. That's quasi-religious, right?
Oh, it's
right?
Overtly Christian.
Overtly religious. Look at
I wouldn't even call it Christian. It almost does it, but it's the overlap of people who are religious or Christian, evangelicals specifically, I think, and then also believe in Q. I think it's pretty much where we should be spending a lot of our time. I was talking to Jeff Jarvis yesterday, and we had a small disagreement on what percentage of the Republican Party is kind of Q followers, or, by the way, what percentage of Q followers were at the Capitol last week. I think it was most. I have no idea to prove it. I think it was most, because that's where they were getting their marching orders and those types of people. And I think and then just more along the lines of that point, I was going to ask you this, though, too. If you think about who was there in Washington on Wednesday and came from all over the country, there's all kinds of different backgrounds you could argue. There's some really interesting article, I think, about how they leaned affluent even. But
that's right.
But the point is, it's what is that old phrase? Not all Republicans are racist, but all racists are Republican. Not all the people there were Q, but they were all Q open.
All the Q people were there, at least in spirit.
Well, yeah. To tolerate those conspiracy theories because they somehow align with your overall mission. Like if you're a Republican who supports Trump, then and you accommodate these Q conspiracy theories, you are Q. You're the same. It's like anything else. You're complicit.
But
you're.
It's actually broader than Q, though.
You're welcoming them into your party.
Right, but look at it this way. It's even beyond Q.
They've been elected.
Just the most extreme. Right, but Q is just the extreme version of that, right? Let's just say that you're a garden variety Trump supporter who still supports Trump today, which is 30% of the voting public, probably. You have to believe in a bunch of articles of faith. One of which is, and by the way, against all evidence, you have to believe the election was stolen, which even Trump's own lawyers will not aver in court. You have to believe that Donald Trump was a good businessman. You have to believe that all of the things that he did, sexual harassment things, aren't important, right? So there are like real, like, to believe in Trump at this point, there's more articles of religious faith attached to that than there are in most religions, and in more that are even more obviously denials of reality. So there really, this has become, to a great degree, I think, for a lot of people, it's sort of like it's a
cult.
It's both religious.
The word you're trying to say is cult.
Cultic. It's cultic.
Yeah.
And it's cultic in a way that really reinforces people's preconceived biases.
Cultic is a word?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
I didn't know that. Yeah.
So, it's that's where we are. We're in now, so say that's half of Republicans, right? McConnell's going to try to kill that. And that's going to be quite a thing to watch. And I don't know if it does once Trump is off the scene. I don't know if it gets more crazy. We'll see. Let's just hope that we don't have some 1930 style crisis, because, the Nazis in the beer hall putsch in 1923, they got swept away. No big deal, right? Hitler goes, writes his book. And then 1929, the Depression hits. And the Nazis were working the stab in the back. I can forget how to pronounce it in German, but the stab in the back thing. Well, what's going to happen now? The stab in the back theory in American culture for those people is going to be the election was stolen. And it's a very similar dynamic that's going to play out. It's just a question of whether circumstance allows that to be weaponized in a significant way in the future.
Yeah. Well, the only thing that would change that, at least slightly, I think, would be Donald Trump saying, nope, it was not stolen. I was wrong.
Which he will never do.
Oh, right. I mean, I don't think anybody thinks that he would, but
yeah.
And I don't even know if it would make a difference, because even today when he comes out, it's so infuriating when throughout his presidency, he would say things with a wink and a nod. I mean, today he said, no violence. I want no violence. And his supporters were quoting that. See, he doesn't want violence. And I'm just sitting there going, no, everybody that supports him, that is capable and interested in violence, will defend against that, saying he has to say that. We know what he wants.
Sure.
And they're right. They're right. He doesn't mean it. But he wants violence.
It's a lawyerly, he says all these things, Nancy and Biden better watch out. Oh, but no violence. That's what he does. I mean, it's a very lawyered up threat against the system and against our government, and against democracy. And this isn't the first. The Nazis, before they had enough power, they spent a lot of time dancing around those lines. So did the Phalangists in Spain before the Spanish Civil War. So, this is all real old school stuff that these people do.
I think it's a more accurate, and a lot of people say this is not my original, but it's more accurate to compare Donald Trump to the people that he learned these behaviors from, which is the mob. The mob going home and, some mafia leader or, just captain going home to their wife and saying, no, I'm a good guy. I do good things. Oh, I would never do that. And then the next night they go out and crush someone and bury them in the East River. I mean, that's who he learned that type of behavior from directly.
Well, and also, I mean, that's not at all the stretch. It also swings around the other way. I mean, the mafia came from the culture that invented fascism.
Good point.
Right? Italy is where fascism in its modern form came fully to fruition first. And the Italian mafia grew up in that culture. So it absolutely, it makes sense. It makes sense.
36 minutes. Thank you.
Nice.
I asked for 10. I love talking to you, man. It's really interesting. Cool. I hope you're wrong about some things that I know you hope you're wrong about. That you said, and I hope you're right about some of the other things. But either way, it gives us all a lot to think about, and we'll be watching hour to hour, and we'll check in with you very soon again. Yeah. Are you going to meet up with us Thursday night potentially at the Hangout?
Yeah,
we'd love to see you.
Thursday nights, I typically build a fire in my backyard and drink beer with people.
Well, if you can make it.
It's my own personal Thursday night hangout.
That's great.
I will
look forward to doing
if I'm
with that.
Available though, I'll be there.
I look forward to doing that with you in person. We'll do a whole show from a fire pit next year this time.
That sounds great. A fireside chat.
Yeah,
Nice.
there you go. We'll have rats.
Awesome.
It'll be awesome.
It'll be fun. Yes, exactly.
Thank you, sir.
Cool. All right, buddy. Talk
Later.
to you.
All right, there he goes. Bill B in DC on Twitter at Bill B in DC. Let him know that you appreciate when he joins me. So great talking to him. I always enjoy it. And now, for the first time, I'm excited to welcome editor-at-large of Reason magazine, which is a libertarian magazine. Matt is the co-author, along with Nick Gillespie, of the 2011 book, The Declaration of Independence, How Libertarian Politics Can Fix What's Wrong with America. He also wrote a 2007 book, McCain, The Myth of the Maverick. And he is also one of the co-hosts of the Fifth Column podcast. I love talking to Matt Welch. We don't always agree on everything, obviously, but he's a really great guy and a good friend of mine. Can't believe it's been a year I've been doing this podcast and haven't been able to get him on, but I'm psyched that we finally worked it out. Here's my conversation with Matt Welch. So I finally have him. I'm looking at him with my own face. I'm looking at his face, and it's my fault because I've been trying to get him on and I haven't followed through. But ladies and gentlemen, the great Matt Welch joins me now on the podcast for the first time. It's so great to finally get you here, and I'm very happy to see you and to catch up with you. And how are you, Matt Welch?
I am super happy to see you in your very fine shed.
Thank you.
Which definitely has more light than my little basement dungeon here in Brooklyn. So I'm kind of jealous. I can look up and see a tiny postage stamp window.
Is that where you get a little? A window is, I think, a window in natural light affect a person a great deal. At one point when I was living in New York City in the early years, I lived in an apartment with no natural light. And it took me a while to figure out what was depressing me. And I really finally figured out, I was like, it's that I don't have a window. I'm in here so much without a window.
Yeah, photosynthesis is not just for plants. That's my feeling about that.
Yeah, thank you for joining me. There's so many things I want to talk with you about, but you were just mentioning I want to get into the most important of issues, which is the word, saying that you got triggered or I triggered you. That really triggers you.
I just don't trigger. I mean, it's not like I haven't been in war, you know. I don't have a PTSD that can be activated. So I don't like to use words like trigger. And it's my oldest daughter now is 12 and she's being, as you can imagine,
I can't imagine. I have 13.
Taught a certain way in New York City, in Brooklyn public schools.
Mm-hmm.
So she's starting to use words like triggered and woke and that kind of stuff. I'm like, you can dial that and bullied. God, they use bullied so much, you know, like if we criticize her, stop bullying me. Like, bro, I'm not bullying you. Mm-hmm. This is parenting. Bullying you if I'd be pointing at you and laughing and teasing you and stuff. And that's not what's going on here. I'm just disagreeing with you. So
I bully my kids.
Well, I mean, I'm looking forward to bullying my kids. Here's how the bullying happens with me is when, you know, on the rare occasion that it snows anymore with global warming, Pete, we go out and like right now we have pods. We've organized a pod with a 5-year-old.
Yep.
So the halftime in which there is no school days, we have a little group of 4 kids. And when it's at our house and there's snow outside, there's definitely some bullying going on in those snowball fights.
Sure.
Or let's just say there's absolutely no quarter given just because they're 5. Like,
right.
You're going to learn the law of the jungle here, kids.
Right.
Which is that I'm going to destroy you.
You're not going to, I mean, you're an athletic person. You're not going to pull your throws. You're going to aim
not.
And you're going to fire. You're not going to aim for the eyeball. You're not a monster.
No. Right in the chest,
yeah.
You know. Or in the legs, because it's really good to knock them over while they're running away from you. I think that's pretty smart. You know, they need to be incentivized to learn how to get the shoulder articulation and throw from distance with accuracy and speed.
Do you miss sports at all?
It's so hard to say. I mean, COVID's been so weird on everything. Obviously, it reminds me of I lived in Europe in the 1990s before there was internet for most of it. It was in Eastern Europe, and so, like, you go from being an absolute sports fanatic. I mean, I was the guy who my walls in high school were covered floor to ceiling with covers of Sporting News and Sports Illustrated and stuff. And I followed every sport. And you go from that to like you consume sports a day and a half later through line scores in the International Herald Tribune.
Yep.
And you just kind of cut it out of your life a little bit. And COVID has been like that too, because everything's all weird and the sports were kind of cut off. But then like you'll find yourself weirdly, like I was super attached to the NBA playoffs this past year in a way that I hadn't been in a decade. So yeah, everything's up, everything's down. I miss being able to play sports athletically, and just being a middle-aged fat load is not as fun as it was when I used to play a lot of pickup basketball.
So do you? Is that COVID that is preventing you from playing, or is it that you got mushy?
Fat load, mushiness, and you just like, what it's like. Like if you're in your prime working years and you have kids. There's like, I know adults who spend a lot of time playing video games, and man, do I not understand them. Most of them, in fact, don't really have.
Why
kids.
do you not? I do too, and I don't play them, but I don't. I mean, why do you not understand? I understand them. I think I don't play those games because if the moment I do is a moment lost, that's how I see it. And I'm not judging people who play whatever. I mean, I know a lot of really smart people who play video games to take their mind off whatever works. But for me, it would be very addictive. And I also feel like it's kind of a waste of time because it goes by so fast. Why are you so opposed to video games?
I'm not opposed, but it's like,
for you personally,
I can't imagine doing it. Similar to you. Like even when I'm engaging in what is obviously some kind of recreational brain offloading, it's usually productive. Like I've spent the last several months when in my off hours doing this deep dive into every single month of the year 1989 in music, and like listening to basically every record, or like skimming through every record that was released there and making these playlists out of it. And it's going to turn into a podcast. 1989 is a very interesting year globally with the revolutions that happened. And there's an interplay between those revolutions and music. And also that's the year I turned 21. Like, and so Beastie Boys and Fight the Power and stuff, all that came out then. And so it's interesting to me, but it's productive. It's not just like me smoking a hoolie and listening to music. Maybe I should do that more. Maybe I would be more relaxed or happy. But yeah, every waking minute, I'm conscious of the need to be productive. I don't sit around and veg out on TV show seasons and things like that. I just can't.
I'm with you. I'm the exact same way. It's just that I'm also, I just found out, much younger. I had no idea that you were that much older than me. I thought you were exactly the same age as me, but you're not, because you were 21 in 1989 and I was not. I don't know how old I was, but I know I'm 45 now. So
yes, that's important.
So, and yet you have a younger looking head than me, which is really upsetting. So I want to talk with you about what's happened. We haven't talked in a long time, but I want to start just by the events of last week. I was listening to you guys on the Fifth Column podcast, Michael Moynihan and how am I saying Camille's name? Camille Foster. And it's great. It's a great podcast. Somebody should listen to it. And you guys did an episode shortly after. What was it? I think I was listening to the Friday episode, and the events happened on Wednesday. Regardless, doesn't matter when.
We recorded it for Wednesday night. So
you did record it when? Yeah, it was.
I was quite drunk and shouty on tequila.
Oh, really? I didn't get that far into it. Apparently.
Okay, cool.
But lots of ways and to approach this and see it. So I'm not exactly sure what the question to start with, other than, did you see it coming?
It was bigger than I certainly expected. And even after, originally it looked more LARPy than what I think we've come to know now. Just because, the visuals of dudes with antlers on their heads and taking selfies and stealing lecterns and stuff. It felt like, oh, cool. And I was under the influence, like a lot of people were. I think the misapprehension that police or the Capitol Hill police kind of let them in and winked and nodded and high-fived on the way in. That's not really how it went down. And there was much more of a kind of there's more organization, there's more force, and people with serious intent than I think was at first. I worried about this in the run up. I worried about this just basically from the moment after the election, that it was not surprising at all that Donald Trump would challenge the election in this way and lie about it on a daily basis and grift on it and BS about it and try to force and just like push elected Republicans' nose into the poop, and say, you know, are you going to follow me down this crazy path? And if you don't, I'm coming after you. I knew all of that. What I was surprised by, and I shouldn't have been, but it's still kind of shocking because it shocks the conscience. I was surprised by the level to which elected Republicans in particular went along with it, play acted themselves. 121 members of the House of Representatives and a half a dozen senators, even after blood was shed in the chamber, voted against certifying the election. Some of them were, you know, whipping up and saying nonsense at the Stop the Steal. I mean, the Republican attorneys general, right? This is kind of an important law office. State AGs, Republicans, sent a letter encouraging people to go to the Stop the Steal rally during, held right at the event of the certification. Like, dudes, you are the law officers. This stuff has been adjudicated in 60 courtrooms. Trump is 1 and 59 in those courtrooms. It is and like dismissed with absolute prejudice. So I was surprised by the extent to which Republicans exhibiting an actual fear, I think, of Trump's base, but also a sense of opportunity in the Josh Hawley and ever slippery Ted Cruz sense of like, hey, maybe I can build my career by pandering to the fantasies of these people. So all of that was more than I expected, even though I expected it to go in that direction. And then the level of violence and seriousness at the Capitol itself was more than I expected, and the level of defense there, which is not to criticize any of the individual officers, particularly Eugene Goodman, but just the lack of preparedness. None of that I was fully expecting. So I've had since 2016 a dark feeling in my gut about the next, like 20 years. So if we got 15 left, according to that, that we're going through a populist moment. Populist moments are, to my mind, kind of universally bad, and they mirror each other, not like a pure both sides way, but like people learn behavior during populist moments, depending on what their opponents do and the kind of negative polarization. So it's bad. It exceeds my imagination of what bad could be, and I'm not in a happy place about how the next 9 days are going to go. And I'm also not in a happy place of where the next, 4 to 8 to 12 years are going to go either. I think it makes me feel like emotionally bad. And I'm trying to keep my head about it and trying to counsel others to not give in to their emotions as they analyze this and react to it and try to work against it. And part of that is telling, as Mitt Romney said, which some people might find kind of difficult to accept, but he had a very good short line. Like, the best way to help, to recognize the valid concerns of whatever number of million people who voted for Trump and who feel really upset right now is to tell them the truth. There needs to be a lot more, instead of like trying to deplatform everybody, trying to find the right adjective to call somebody, just tell people the truth right now. And also in yourself, this is what I counsel to, especially to journalists, but everybody else, like, you don't have to exaggerate what happened. You don't have to like invent new languages and new conspiracies on your side. Just tell everybody the truth. And this is the way that we can kind of begin to crawl out of this hole, but it's a real deep hole. And I feel really, really bad about it.
Is that truth that you're talking about regarding the outcome of the election specifically, or is there some other?
Yes, but everything else too. You know, like we just don't need to build new conspiracies in any direction. You know, the most pressing and salient truth is the election was kind of lopsided in the direction of the victor, Joe Biden. But meanwhile, also it wasn't lopsided, or at least it wasn't a landslide for the Democratic Party. You know, the Republicans did better than expected in the House and a bunch of other stuff besides. So it was a mixed verdict of an election, but like the presidential outcome is not in doubt. There is nothing to steal. Nothing was stolen. Stop it. Stop it, crazy people. There isn't going to be some magic light switch flipped on in January to make it go away. That was fantasy, and it's fantasy whipped up by a sitting president who, turned against his own vice president and encouraged a mob to go to the Capitol, where they hung, they created a gallows and chanted "Hang Mike Pence" while committing violence against cops. I mean, that's a pretty bad place. An initial starting point is stop lying to people and stop believing lies. But also it is don't create new, smaller, less consequential lies in describing that and in kind of reacting to the violence yourself from everybody. Like, clean your own house, as we used to say in the 80s when you were like in diapers. Pete, perestroika begins in the home. We can all, and I put myself in here as well, we can all do a better job of showing a fealty towards whatever the actual truth is, and not spending all of our time trying to whip up the least generous interpretation of every event and every perceived slight of our enemies, whoever they might be.
Where does Glasnost begin?
That's the difficulty. And actually, if you think about it, it doesn't make sense. The Glasnost should begin at home, right? Because Glasnost. That's what I'm very confused now. Yeah, perestroika, but perestroika is just a better word. So
I don't know. I got to think about that. Everybody's gonna have to look them both up now. But Matt Welch, let's stay with. I want to ask about 50 follow-ups, but I'm getting better at not interrupting. I don't know if you've picked up on that, but now I'm writing things down that you say, and then I go back to them. So let me just start with the people that were in the Capitol, the people that showed up in Washington D.C., and let's say the people that legitimately trespassed onto the Capitol grounds and went inside, and then there's another group of people who, while inside, vandalized things and made threats, and then there's obviously a smaller group of people who were very violent. But that is a fairly large group of people, depending on, how you look at it, I suppose. How do you see those people and what consequences they should have to face?
I am a hippie, as you can see visually, and I don't like putting people in prison. I don't like people being in jail, and so on. So my initial reaction to this was like, I don't want the LARPers to go to jail. Again, as we see more evidence for what happened, we see more violence, we see more organization, we see more criminal intent, in addition to just absolute boorish, jackhole-ish behavior. Obviously, some people are going to going to merit the prison sentences they're definitely going to get because they went into the Capitol building without a mask on and did violence while there's cameras all over the damn place. I mean, Jeebus H, popsicle toothpicks. So I don't know. I don't know what the person who is in the back of the line is like, oh, the door's open, I'm going to walk in. I don't know if I want to see them rot in jail. I generally I want our jails to be about, 15% as full as they currently are right now. At the same time, of all of the norms that exist in the world, the norm of not, how you put this, doing violence on the elected legislature at the moment that they're certifying a presidential election with the intent to derail or delay that certification, while the second, third, and fourth line in succession of the president, whose insignia as you're wearing, are in the building, and people among you are having Molotov cocktails and zip ties and all this kind of stuff, and you're bringing in news. That strikes me as something that you want to prevent. That's something that's worthy of, and that's gets into the impeachment conversation too, which I don't know ultimately where I'm at, but I'm probably leaning towards the side of like you've got, it's definitely an impeachable offense. There's no question about that. Donald Trump has behaved despicably since the election, during this whole process, during the whole day. Afterwards, everything about it's been despicable, and you want to disincentivize people from ever behaving that way again. So I don't know what the exact prescription is for grandma who was walking in with a MAGA hat and saying this is a nice building, or the dude is hanging by one hand in the Senate chamber or wherever he was with a full gas mask on. Who is since that guy is like, oh, I'm sorry, just events gotta.
I haven't heard anything about that guy.
Dude, really? You were hanging by one hand, like wearing like combat gear. Nope, that's not. Sorry, you're gonna go for a while. So
those are all. There's a lot of nuance there with the different people and what they did and what the consequences should be, but. Strangely, I find myself for the first, not usually here, but on the side of kind of harsher penalties, because a lot of these people came from all over the country. And I don't know, I've been talking about conspiracy theories and worry about conspiracy theories as long as I've been in media. And I think it's the biggest problem. I've always thought conspiracy issues were the biggest problem. People always said, oh, shut up, just don't talk about them, don't give them any traffic. But now, because of the way that technology works and the internet and media, you can spread a theory that's believable, especially around the planet in under a few seconds, and the damage it can do is incalculable, as we've seen. And so I kind of feel like if you came all the way from Arkansas to do this, when you go back, everybody should know who you are and what you did, and they should not do that in their state house, by the way. I'm not saying everybody's going to travel all the way across the country to D.C. to overthrow the government, but I'm just worried about people who think that it's okay to go to their state houses strapped as well, because many of these states are allowed to carry guns. And so I'm on the side of harsher penalties, but I want to ask you more questions, which is getting back to Trump and where you are and what the results should be. What do you think about the first impeachment now? And you look back at that, I don't know where you were then, but I was listening to Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee on Chris Hayes' show last night, and she made a good point about all of those that did not vote to impeach. They're guilty too. I mean, Donald Trump was always dangerous. He's always been dangerous. He's been responsible for so many bad things that are, I think, impeachable. If they had gotten rid of him then, when I think it's clear that they should have impeached him, the Senate at least, then we wouldn't have lost these people's lives.
I mean, yes, but it's also true if you could have impeached him on his first day of office, then a lot of bad things wouldn't happen. But would that have been the correct thing to do then? No, because he hadn't committed an impeachable offense, or at least provably, in his first day of office, right? So I don't know that consequential thinking on this is.
Don't you think there were hundreds of impeachable offenses over the last 4 years that they didn't have the political support for, but technically, like when he met with Putin and said he believes Putin over his own intelligence, much less, so many of the other crimes that he's committed.
Impeachment. To remind ourselves, because this is coming up this week as we talk about it. People try to create this criminal violation standard, right?
It's not criminal. It's just you're a fucking asshole. Get lost.
No, exactly. It is.
I think that's the actual language.
It is the actual language. So, I don't think that Donald Trump is guilty of incitement, as incitement has been defined by the Supreme Court. I think by the plain language of the word incitement and by the judgment of the standard of high crimes and misdemeanors, which is whatever Congress decides it is, he is absolutely guilty of incitement. So I think that the impeachable offense as drawn up right now, that he incited this mob of people to go in there, is correct. And so it's an impeachable.
I think that's a really important point about, regardless of what you think the legal terminology, the legal case for it is. And I think you can make a legal case, but I don't know, and no one should listen to me on it. But my friend Laura Coates did on CNN. I thought it was pretty convincing, but that's not the point. The point is the one that you're making.
Yeah. So I thought at the time, and I'm even, impeachment, that was like, 500 years ago? It's hard to remember exactly. I thought that the most salient cowardice there was on the part of Republicans who did everything to not hear it. They didn't take the Senate trial with any seriousness at all. They
called no witnesses.
They turned it to a pure kind of political power calculation. And there's an entire generation of Republican politicians who I think have disgraced themselves. Right now, my focus is on the disgrace that they have shown in the last 2 months and the last week, and particularly those 127 members of Congress who voted against certifying the election. But they also behaved pretty damn badly during the impeachment process. I think that Trump committed an impeachable offense for sure in the original impeachment. So whether I blame Republicans then for the violence now, it is for me a little bit more of a stretch. But
what about if they hadn't impeached him, Matt? Then I'm not. Who knows? I think anybody who makes a calculation about how many lives would have been saved, and I'm now talking about COVID, is probably wrong. But it could have. It obviously would have been handled much better with anyone else but Donald Trump in charge. COVID. If they had impeached him last year around this time, then the government's reaction to the virus would have been better. I think I can say that for fair.
I'm not sure. I'm honest to goodness, not sure. Right. Like if you look at what are the bad parts of the governmental response, like what were the key bad parts of the response?
Just wear a mask.
Yeah, but that's not the key bad part of the response. I don't think
it's not the key bad part, but it's role modeling. It's parenting. Like if he wore a mask and said wear a mask, he made it a political thing. And just starting there, how many lives would have been saved if he just said wear a mask? I'm wearing a mask. Everybody wear a mask.
I agree. And I also think that a bigger problem with the federal government response was that the FDA blocked testing out of the gate. We botched testing like crazy out of the gate. And that wasn't a Trump thing. That was a bureaucratic thing. And a bureaucratic thing is the existing bureaucracy. Would someone have cut through the bureaucracy faster than he did as a response to that? Maybe
he was in charge of appointing the people at the FDA. He has responsibility for their reaction.
For sure. But the processes that led to that were not Trumpian processes. They were bureaucratic processes that didn't mark his fingerprints in any meaningful way. If anything, he's been someone who he's mentioned in, I think, 2 different State of the Union addresses, how the FDA needs to work faster towards approving drugs and be more nimble about various things. Would a ex-politician been better? I think for sure, the Centers for Disease Control in their 2006 guidance about what to do in a pandemic. A key thing that they emphasize straight up front is like, just tell the truth to people, including what you don't know, and have a consistent message and be on point about that. Trump absolutely botched that because, of course, he can't tell the truth about anything. He can't be consistent about anything except his own a-holery. So that definitely to the bad response. I don't know in the alternative universe whether for sure, it's going to, we have a tendency to moralize constantly COVID response, depending on whether we like this governor, dislike this governor, mayor, whatever. And also moralize personal behavior in it. I've seen this a lot in California, which I've gone back and forth from a lot in last fall. And like the disease doesn't care about your political morals. It just doesn't. It is so much more regional. You'll have states next to each other that have different approaches. And they'll basically have the same curve on this stuff because it's kind of a regionally affected disease. So it's quite possible that we would have saved lives had Trump not been there. And he reacted terribly. to COVID, and just he governs badly. It's for sure. I don't have the same certainty as you that it would have saved X number of lives.
What are your thoughts and feelings on Twitter banning Trump and other accounts, and what you've seen happen with Parler, which is poor man's Twitter, and its host, Amazon, I think, saying we're not going to host you. Parler is down. Also, a number of big companies are taking their donations away from those who have perpetuated the big lie about the election. So many developments over the last few days since the attempt, the insurrection attempt. I don't know what we're calling it. I still haven't settled on the Capitol. And I want to know your reaction to starting with Twitter deplatforming Trump and others.
Totally within their rights as private entities with their free association rights, which I will defend to the bitter end. And I don't like it, is how I feel about that. I want a culture of maximal as possible exchange. And I feel like the great deplatforming, which is just beginning and will take a lot of people with it, is going to increase the sense of martyrdom, not just by Trump, who will be in the rearview mirror soon enough, but by whole swaths of the population.
Don Bongino.
Oh, he's so terrible.
I once tweeted something like subtly mean, like called him a douche or something. Yeah. And for the next 48 hours, it was just like nothing before. Like even when I did Rogan last year and we argued about guns, people weren't nearly as, I mean, it came hard and fast and consistent for like 40. He's got a real army, that guy.
It does. So like, but no, I don't like it. I don't like to see the exercise of power in that way. I don't think that the remedy to what I don't like is governmental action. Mm-hmm. I think that you let people exercise their free association and things will develop to replace whatever.
But that's not government action, as you made clear. The Twitter,
yes.
just
yeah, it's not. And I mean, and the conservatives and progressives, I think, are both wrong in wanting to go after Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act for different reasons. But so here's a parallel. In December 2015, there was the San Bernardino terrorist attack that killed, I forget how many people, like 15. And this was in the middle of a presidential campaign. Hillary Clinton says we're going to have to shut down. I forget exactly her term of art, but it was like we're going to have to like close off, forbid people from celebrating terrorism online. We're going to have to like she's always had a very censorious approach towards free speech. I wrote a big cover story about it for Reason a while ago. And then Donald Trump made the bigger headline the next day saying we're going to have to close down whole parts of the internet. Okay. So you get, I mean, like, look, there's been terrorism. There's blood on the floor. These people use these tools to organize. Of course, we need to clump it off. Who opposed those things besides, civil libertarian jerkwads like me who opposed that it was investigators, right? Because these people are hiding in plain sight on Facebook and YouTube and Twitter and everywhere. Where do you think we are getting the information to arrest people, end of Goodfellas style as they go back to their homes in Arkansas and elsewhere after the Capitol riots? Because they were live streaming on Facebook. They were in plain sight. I think that driving them to the dark web or wherever they're supposed to go it makes our experience on Twitter less rich. And so you think, hey, my God, what are you talking about? Well, you know what? I didn't follow Donald Trump. You could actually mute him too. I mute a lot of people every day. I wake up in the morning and I spend some time muting.
Well, that's because everybody makes a mistake. This has really got to be seriously annoying. It's not even funny that you're someone that you're not. There's a guy named Matt Welch on Twitter, and he is reprehensible person, horrible person. And several times over the years, people will be like, I can't believe you're friends with this guy. I'm like, I'm not. I hate that guy. They're like, yeah, you have him on your show all the time. I'm like, nope, that's Matt Welch. And it happened last week, which is why you're here today, because it reminded me that I have been meaning to get you back on, and that listener was like, look what Matt Welch said. But anyway,
at least one time, and now I'm forgetting the details, but I was booked or he was booked on a major media outlet by mistake, thinking that it was the other person. So this happens at least once a week. Like have
you ever talked to that guy?
I don't think so. No, not in person. I think we might have. We're both a little bit funny about it on occasion. I mean, he's super anti-pornography.
He's like this extreme Christian, radical Christian guy, men's
so
rights guy.
Surprised to hear that from me. And actually not me. But people, the confusion is it's constant. But that, like, I want to be able to. I don't want to hunt down people's expression, and I also don't want to see in America what's happened in Europe, which is they have much bigger hate speech laws. You can't deny the Armenian genocide without risking prison time in a half a dozen countries in Europe, which is crazy to me. And I say that as a huge Armenian genocide Turkish critic of the way that they've tried to suppress speech about this. But what does that do? It drives these things into the shadows, makes it sexy and full of martyr. In France, my wife's French. There are entire subcultures of people like who dare speak the forbidden truths that you're not allowed to say, and everyone likes them and stuff, and they grow their own conspiracy factories. Even it's like mushrooms growing in a basement somewhere. I don't think that's healthy, and I don't think that the urge to censoriousness is healthy in the culture. An example of this is like when I forget what Simon & Schuster decided to cancel Josh Hawley's book.
Right.
Josh Hawley's going to be able, but Josh Hawley, who I loathe, who I think should be, his name should be held in infamy forever. And he will be able to publish that elsewhere. I'm not worried about Josh Hawley. I'm worried actually about the people who want to censor him. Because you're there's a bunch of stupid Antifa kids out in front of Powell's bookstore, the best bookstore in the country, in Portland, Oregon. They're out there because they were mad and they'd been smashing stuff up in Portland for a while. They're mad that Powell's carried, even in its online catalog, which has a cajillion titles, Andy Ngo's book, and Andy Ngo's an anti-Antifa guy who they hate. And it's like, no. I don't like censoriousness coming from inside the house, inside the building. If you're running Simon & Schuster, you publish books, dude. You publish Mein Kampf is somewhere lurking in there. You should be able to publish terrible books from terrible people. That's what publishing is. And I think there's this urge to censoriousness on the left as a remedy for what happened on Wednesday, and for a remedy of a lot of different ills, real and perceived. That is not going to end well. It's going to catch a lot of people who are not bad people in its dragnet. It's going to make them feel like martyrs, and it's going to increase, not decrease, the level of polarization and alienation in this country. And I think all of it's not very good.
I think you're probably right, although I'm not positive. Where I really still don't know. And I think you bringing up the culture and the laws in Europe is a really important case. Who is it? The woman who is the former head of the ACLU, who wrote a whole book about that.
Nadine Strawson.
That's right. I remember her making a very convincing case for that. But what do you think about, for example, Congresswoman Elise Stefanik, who has no right to be a congresswoman in a beautiful upstate New York where I'm from? She has been booted from Harvard Institute of Politics over election lies. I mean, if they are lying about the election, should they have their funding, taken from them by their big donors? Should they be kicked off of Harvard Institute of Politics? If they're a congressman and you're continually perpetuating the lie about the election, what should the consequences be for those congressmen now?
I mean, a lot of the action that's happened over the last 48 hours has been Citibank or whoever saying we're going to pull funding from these particular congressmen and women. Great. That's like the definition of free association rights. You didn't have to give them money before. Probably didn't even like you giving money to them before.
Right.
Pull their funding. I want these people to suffer the consequences of their actions, particularly though not only in actual elections. I would prefer to live in a world in which the Republican Party could police its own and say, we got it. Something's gone deeply off the rails here, and try to kind of drive these thoughts out of the party's head, and take its own internal corrective. That's not going to happen. I would like to see that. Ross Douthat had a pretty good column about this today, about the possibilities of the Republican Party fracturing, even though that never seems to really fully happen. But he sketched out some scenarios that are interesting. I don't think that the right way to do it is to expel Josh Hawley and Ted Cruz from the Senate somehow. I think people are trying to draft articles that would somehow manage to do that. It's not going to happen, and I don't think that's the correct remedy for their behavior. But like everyone in the like their previous backers saying, "My God, these people are awful cretins." Great, because they are.
The people in office in Congress that are perpetuating the lie that Trump has come up with, that he lost the election, those people should have, I think I just asked you this, but again, what consequences specifically? They
should be shunned. They shouldn't be arrested. They shouldn't be expelled through some action by their colleagues from the Senate. I would like to see them, stripped of whatever committee assignments. I mean, there's punishments. The private sector, whatever guild organizations they belong to can tell them all to go to hell. I'm happy with all of it. I am not happy. I don't think that it's a healthy response from people who work in the free speech industry, like, book publishers, to try to censor them. I don't think that they should be deplatformed from Twitter or things like that. But people who have associational relationships with them should tell them to go to hell. I'm happy with that, but I don't think that they should be removed by force from office.
My last question is what I'm hearing you talk about on your podcast, The Fifth Column, and other places. I feel like I want to argue with you about, which is this kind of legitimate concern that I think you have of yours, is that the pendulum swings backwards, and populism and what we're seeing the right do now can kind of give permission to folks on the left to do. And I'm really paraphrasing your otherwise very articulate theory and concern here. But my argument is still, and although this might be changing because so much is changing so fast, it still remains that those of us on the left do not believe in conspiracy theories. We believe in small conspiracy theories sometimes. We believe that things happen that they didn't. We believe in things that we want to happen that didn't. For example, the guy apparently didn't tase his balls. I think a lot of people on the left wanted to believe that. Maybe it did happen, maybe it didn't, who knows. That's not a great example. But we want to believe, for example, that so many people on the left were sharing the video of Don Jr. and Trump backstage at the rally, saying that was during the actual riot. It wasn't, but a lot of people on the left shared that. But those are the kinds of things that the left temporarily believes and perpetuates irresponsibly. But we don't believe on the left, I'm going to go ahead and generalize, in conspiracy theories. I don't think there's any imminent danger of that, and we never have, and you cannot cite one.
I cannot cite a single conspiracy theory
that anybody in prominence in media, much less specifically in Congress, no leader has perpetuated a conspiracy theory on the left. Period, is what I'm going to say. Finish him. Finish him.
So is the problem with public education that we just don't spend enough money on it, that we've been cutting funding over time? Because that's what Hillary Clinton says. That's what Joe Biden has said.
That's a policy theory.
Is it? It's a policy theory? Is it actually? There's a number associated with it.
Wait, say it again. What's the?
Is the problem with K through 12 public education is that we've cut funding for it?
Yeah, I think that's a policy theory.
It's not a policy theory. It's a yes or no question.
You're saying that's a conspiracy theory, that the left believes we haven't spent enough money on public education?
That we've actually cut funding.
That we've cut funding. I don't. Yeah, you're saying we spend more and more money on education federally than people think?
Not federally, just in general, like as total K through 12 public spending has increased, adjusted for inflation per student by 3 times since 1970. And you always hear the opposite asserted. It's a random, pointless thing, but like that's
if you said it's random and pointless. So if you say it's random and pointless, you're the one making the point. Then you're making my point because it's random and pointless. I say it's random and pointless. It's not random and pointless because it has knock-on effects on how we treat education policy and how Democrats in particular respond to problems in the education system. So it has significance. I agree with, I think, the spirit of your bold inquiry, which is that this is not the same as 127 members of Congress voting against certifying the election. No, but it's not the same as climate change. It's not the same as so many other really important, consequential life or death things that overwhelmingly the entire caucus believes in sells.
I think that, people have made assertions about climate change that if we don't do X within 10 years, that's it. I think that's conspiratorial. I don't think that is the underlying sources of that produced that commonly cited thing don't support that conclusion. Conspiracy theories are just among us. They happen. We all believe in them. I believe in them. I'm sure. I actually believe in a couple very specific ones and that are really fun. Yeah. So it's all about Bob Woodward, man. But it's among us. I please understand that I am not making an assertion of equality of conspiracy, especially in this exact moment. At all. And I think that the pressing madness is happening in this direction more than it's happening in this direction. But it doesn't absolve anyone. It doesn't mean that that people are not going to be prone to it if they don't watch it, police it among themselves.
Right.
I think it's around us. I mean, is it a conspiracy theory to assert that there's more police violence against Black people now than there was 10 years ago? I don't know if I call it a conspiracy theory. It's a pretty widely held position or belief. It's not true to the extent that we can measure these things. So like what you have to police your own self is the spirit.
Well, the thing about that one, of course, is that I think it's probably true in terms of statistics, in terms of the amount of violence. But yeah. The more important point is the vast majority of Americans have finally realized how much violence there is against Black people. People didn't know. That's what the discovery is. People didn't know unless they were subject and victim to that violence, how much violence there was. So it's not like that people should be screaming, there's so much more violence than there was. It's holy shit, there's a lot of violence that most of us had no idea was happening.
Yeah, and thank God for the technology that allowed people to route around the lack of media coverage of all that kind of stuff.
Right,
that's it. People can see with their own eyes, and they're shocked, and they should be because it's shocking what happens. But anyways, no, again. I mean, we are all conspiracy theory is as old as America. It's older than America. But
it matters who's selling them.
Sure, it does. And when the president of the United States is or one of the 18 people running for president in 2016 is among the most influential peddlers of a crazy ass conspiracy about the sitting president, that shows that party that elevates that person has a sickness.
I was at the RNC. I love to mention this because I feel like it gives me some credibility. I was at the RNC in 2016, and I was saying to Trump supporters, are you not concerned that he believes in conspiracy theories? What conspiracy theories? Well, the president wasn't born here. He's anti-vaccine and climate change. Well, I haven't heard him on any of those things, is the response I got. Okay, well, that's fine. But I was saying it back then. I've been screaming about it for years. You're right. I think you're right. It'll always be there. The left believes in this or that. But the difference to me, and I guess the finest point I'm trying to make, is leaders selling it. Because it's not only Trump, I'm going to go ahead and say the entire right-wing media echo chamber is almost entirely selling it if they want to make any money at all. From Fox News down to Don Bongino and Mark Levin and Ben Shapiro. They're all selling it.
I wouldn't say entire and I wouldn't say all, but a huge amount.
Who's not?
Huge amount. No, I mean, my pal Kennedy doesn't do that shit. She's on Fox every day.
I'm going to find something from that she said and send it to you. Okay. You'll have to answer for your friend Kennedy.
Have fun. No, I mean, look up her interview with Rudy Giuliani when he was peddling Hunter Biden stuff. It's phenomenal and hilarious. She's not having it at all with him.
All right. Well, I have a billion more questions, but I've been talking to you for more time than I asked for, and I want to do it again really soon. It's so great to catch up with you and have you on the podcast for the first time. I'm glad that you're doing well, and I'm glad that I've satiated so many listeners who have wanted to hear from you. So please join me again, and I really appreciate it. Oh, you know what? Last point, why don't you just tell folks about the Fifth Column and your podcast, which is really well.
Thank you. So Fifth Column, you can follow us at We the Fifth on Twitter, and then it links to everything. And I think it's WeTheFifth.com. This podcast to do with Michael Moynihan and Camille Foster. Pretty fun. Pretty good. I also am the host of the Reason Roundtable podcast, which is weeklies on Mondays at Reason Magazine, where I work. You can just follow that at Reason. And you can get me on Twitter at Matt Welch.
What is, say hi to Michael Moynihan for me, but how consistent is he scheduled? Like, is he show up now on time for things?
He shows up more than any of us do.
Oh, has he changed or was it just me?
It totally, no. He grew to love it. It also helps that we have an extra Patreon level and money is
right. There's
an
incentive.
Incredible motivator, but
yeah. Fair enough. I didn't pay him for his appearance. That's a good point. Thank you very much, buddy. Great to see you.
Thanks. Great to see you, too.
There he goes, Matt Welch, at Matt Welch. Check out Reason Magazine, of course. I listened to his podcast, which is very interesting. And I like talking to Matt. I don't know what he was talking about when he talked about the left-wing conspiracy theories and the education budget and all that. But if that's the best he could throw at me, then I think we're pretty good so far. Although things could always change. And I love talking to Matt. Thank you so much, Matt. Appreciate that. And, of course, Bill Boyle and everybody listening. Thank you for supporting the show. If you haven't signed up for a paid subscription, now is the time. Come on. Patreon.com/Pete Dominic, or go to the paid subscription link in the show notes. Hope to see you Thursday night at the Hangout anytime on the Discord platform where you're never alone. Truly, I love you, and I'll talk to you tomorrow. Thanks for listening. Tell your friends. And take it away, John Carroll.